Okay, I guess maybe you've got just an info text. This webinar will be recorded, but don't worry about your information. It's not in there. It's just my face and my presentation and my voice, but not your personal information. Before we start, my name is Lynn. I will tell you much more about me later on. And yeah, we will record this webinar, and as you recognize, probably you're muted and your camera is switched off. But you can drop some questions in the Q&A for my German peeps that have their settings in German. You can drop your questions in Fragen und Antworten if you're able to find that. And my colleagues will show up at the end of the webinar. So Juliane will moderate the questions and will organize them and will ask them to me and my colleague Matthias, who will show up at the end as well. So we will try to answer everything that you're interested in. But let's start. As you've already seen in LinkedIn, in the mailing, or wherever you saw our webinar, the title of today is Leveraging Alteryx for Pharma. And yeah, what that contains, we will see later. Of course, the pharmaceutical sector is very big and the use cases are very different, but we will look at a few examples and how you could approach challenges and create them in Alteryx and visualize it with other dashboarding tools. But let's look at what I will be talking about. I will do a brief introduction about myself and my company. Then we will have a broad overview about Alteryx. This is not a training, so I will just touch here and there to give you a feeling. And then we will jump into an example in Alteryx and see how it functions. Alteryx is not understands itself not as a dashboarding tool. So Alteryx is for analysis, all data science, and so on. But the dashboarding would be more comfortable in another tool. But I will talk about that more later. But we will see a few visualization in Alteryx also. And in the fourth chapter, we will bring everything together. So Alteryx, visualizations, and how to handle data and so on. And then I will sum everything up and give you some contact data, and we'll try to answer all your questions if you have any. So let's start with me. I'm Lynn Petzold. I'm a data scientist. I come from a mathematics background. I studied applied math, and I'm at Statsoft in Hamburg since 2022, so a little bit more than 2 years. And on the right-hand side, you see all my certificates, just to say I have a little bit of experience in Alteryx, but also in TIBCO, Spotfire, and TIBCO Statistica. I think a lot of people who watch it today know Spotfire and Statistica and know that the naming switches up all the time, but I think you know what I mean. Yeah, what I do at Statsoft is all the math stuff, consulting, analyzing and stuff, and also doing software trainings in the software we sell. But that's enough from me. A little bit about my company. So Statsoft is specialized in data science and solution provider for advanced analytics, machine learning, artificial intelligence, so all the buzzwords, you know. So basically all in data science world, we sell software and we do trainings and support and consulting on them. As I said, I'm based in Hamburg, but there's also a Statsoft company placed in Krakow. You might know them as Statsoft Polska. We belong together, we work together, just to clear it a little bit up. Here I put in a few colorful logos from a few pharma, biotech, medical customers of ours, just to show you we have experience. We have experience over 30 years, and our biggest branch is the pharma branch, but we work for like every other sector there is also, because in the end everything is data science. Yeah, let's come to Alteryx. So here are just a few numbers just to show you how big Alteryx is. So there are about 8,600 clients. And what is really important, there are over 500,000 community members, which is really nice. I didn't see that in in any other software yet, because the community is really active. And if you have a problem, you can Google it and find your answer within the community, or just post your problem and somebody will respond. Not even Alteryx has the time to respond, because or put response first, because there are so many members who are really active in there. And Alteryx exists for over 25 years also, comes from a geospatial background, so you could also do spatial analysis in there. Here, of course, a lot of more colorful logos from companies that use Alteryx, so basically from all different industry sectors. But what does Alteryx? It takes data, like it says on the slide, any data anywhere. So you could have databases, you could take your data from Excel, SharePoint, anywhere you have some kind of data, and connect them to Alteryx. There are, as you can see, more than 80 additional connectors for Alteryx. So basically you can connect to everything you want. Then as you see here in the little laptop, there's some calculation. We will see later on these tools, or this little round or almost round icons. They calculate something, they analyze something, and then when you're done with your calculation, you will write your data back to, for example, an Excel file in the simplest case, or write it back and use it in Spotfire, Tableau, Power BI. So basically you can use Alteryx for data prep, blend, enrichment, analytics, reporting, data science, machine learning, optimization. Everything is in there, or you can build it in there. And as I said, Alteryx is not a dashboarding tool. So if you want to have a dashboard where you can drill into the data dynamically and play around with filters, yeah, you would be advised to use maybe Spotfire and Tableau, but we will see later on that it is possible to visualize, and if you're really deep into your data, it might be better to visualize it in Alteryx itself. But let's see an example. So here's a little workflow, just in a video, how you would develop something. So you have in here, for example, 2 inputs from an Excel file, from a database or something else. Then you have this middle part who do something, join it together, calculate. and then in the end write it back to something. Maybe here it is also important to say you load your data into Alteryx, calculate in Alteryx itself, and write it back somewhere. So some customers had the fear that they would change their original data, but that's not the case with Alteryx. It just loads it, calculates something, and then you decide where to write it back. So there's no problem of overwriting something that you did not want. But let's start with an example here. So I close my presentation, and we will start not in Alteryx itself, but in my Explorer, and I have to open up the right folder. So I opened up the right folder, and we start with this example. So we have two Excels, and we want to do something with it. So just let us see what's in there. So I will just open them up, put them side by side, and we have our data set we will be looking at for today. And we see the first 4 columns. I marked them in a gray shade. They are the same. We have a batch ID, we have a date time, and then calculated from that a day and a time as an extra column. And then we have on the left-hand side pH level and concentration, and on the right-hand side energy, pressure, and volume. So we have some kind of pharmaceutical experiment here going on. These data are not from a real experiment, so please don't be mad at me if they don't make sense in some kind of capacity. But what do we want typical to do with this? We had a customer who had exactly this problem with other data, of course. They had 2 sensors who were measuring some physical measurements, but the times didn't match up. And they were wondering if we could use Alteryx to bring the data together and aggregate or interpolate the data to have the same time steps and time points. So when you look into here, the first line in the left-hand side starts at midnight. The one on the right-hand side starts 3 minutes later. So they don't match up. And if you look closely into the small numbers, they are sometimes the same time point and sometimes they differ a little bit. So that's a lot of times the case for experiments in the pharma sector or everywhere else where you have experiments that kind. So we want to put this into Alteryx. And I will open up Alteryx now. And it may be a little bit overwhelming if you are not used to that kind of software or you haven't seen Alteryx already. But the most important part is this white space here. It's the workflow, the workspace we will create there. So we put our little tools in here or little calculations and create some kind of flow. The second important thing is up here, it's the toolbar. There are a lot of tools, so each tool is some kind of calculation or data change in there. And we see here, as in the video before, these tools have different colors. And I think it's really nice because when you look at the different tabs up here, they're sorted by by topic. So all the in and out are greenish. All the preparation tools are dark blue. So they're all color coded for the topic that is used. So if you're into Alteryx like a few weeks, you can recognize all the colors and look at a new workflow and get a sense of what is happening in there. So I think that's pretty neat. To the other areas, we will come later. So here on the left-hand side and on the bottom. But the most important thing will be today the middle. So how do we get our data in here? We can just mark them in our Explorer and drag and drop them into Alteryx. And a window will pop up where you could select your sheet for Alteryx. And we only have one sheet, so we click OK. And for the second one, we click OK. And then we have our data in here. And now when I click on the tools, I see in the configuration window some information. It will look different for all the tools, but in here we see where I saved this file and get a preview of the data and can change the file format and so on. But when you drag and drop it in there, it will be automatically the right way, but you can alter it, of course. But now we want to join them together. So we can look in our favorites for the join tool, or just go to the tab join and drag and drop it in here. We can also click on each tool in the toolbar and get a summary of what the tool does, and even could open an example to see how to use that tool. But I just dragged and dropped it in here. I can connect everything together, and then I have to specify which fields need to be joined. So in our case, it would be datetime with the date and the time in one thing. And I will just make this a little bigger. And down here, we could decide which columns we want. So I just deselect the ones that we have double in there. And to get the data out, because in here you see down in the results window, no data is available, and we need to run the workflow. So when we run it, it takes a millisecond or something like that, and we get out our data when we click on run. And when we now look at our join tool, we have three, it's called anchors on the right-hand side. And these are the different join options. So in other softwares, you would have to decide what kind of join you want to do. In Alteryx, you just get for the L anchor, the left unjoined. For the J, you get the inner join, and for the right, you get, or for the R, you get the right unjoined. And you would have to union them together in a sense that you, for example, would like to have a left join and all the left unjoined with it. You would use a union tool and put it in to union everything together. And to see our data better, go back to favorites and sort it by datetime to have it in the right order. So I took this sort tool, dragged it down there, it got automatically connected, and I sort by datetime. I click run. And now we have, when we click on here, we have all the data together. But of course, we see what we probably thought would happen. We are not able to join the datetime together because there are mismatches and delays. So for some rows, it was able to join them together, and for others, we have this null or empty values in here. So we have to tackle that, and there are different approaches to do that, but we will see that now. So I will jump into another workspace, like in a good cooking video. I prepared something. So in here we see exactly the same we did, but we have a few documentations in there. So I put in a few areas, rectangles around the tools to document what was done there, because when I come back in half a year or something like that, I don't know what's going on. I have to look into it harder. And in this case, I just put in some fields to document. So I have, for example, here also the columns that are important for this data, and here the columns that are important for this data. There are many things how to document in Alteryx, which is really useful. You can also put some tools, or you could put tools into a container in your workspace and disable the container. So put it in a box, just disable it, and at another point enable it again and do the calculations. But you don't have to delete them and put them in again. You can select tools and group them together. You could even import pictures in here to help the user understand the workflow and go forward. But back to our problem. When we go here in our sorting tool, we see the data that we saw beforehand, and we now will handle the aggregation. So we had the customer. We developed this together with that decided they wanted to approach the problem with aggregating the data over a given time interval. So just let's just jump into this tool to explain it better, because I wrote it down there. So it's really small to read, but in this macro, all numerical columns get aggregated to a given time interval, and missing fields will be interpolated afterwards. So the user could choose the size of the time interval, and all the data that lies in this time interval will be aggregated. So in this instance, it would be by the mean value, but you can switch it up as you like, as I will show you later. Maybe you recognized by this little tool that there's the name StatSoft over it, and the icon looks a little bit different from the style. It's because we designed it and we created this tool in Alteryx. It's called a macro when you create a tool. It might be a little bit confusing, the word macro, because it means something totally different in other software. But what is in here, when I right-click on it and open the macro, it opens up, and you can just see it's a workflow like we saw before. So a macro is basically a workflow within a tool, and we can configure the input, the output, the documentation, the customizability with this little black and white tools. For example, we see here comes in the size of the interval that the user could choose. So we could twist it around and put more tools in it. So basically we created this tool without any coding, and it could be used for any kind of data. So we just need to have for this tool some datetime column, and all the numerical columns will be aggregated to the given size of interval. As said, there might be some interpolation also. It's because when we look at all the 15 minutes intervals, for example, there might some intervals not all the data in it. So maybe pressure is not measured in that time interval. So we would interpolate between the interval beforehand and afterwards to get all the data. So this would be, when we look at the tool, the last anchor, it's called. When we look at the documentation, here we have aggregated and interpolated data. And also we could feed some data about error messages. In this case, there is nothing that went wrong here. But what did we get out of here? We can just always grab a binocular, so a browse tool it's called. It's in favorites or in recommended all to the left, and we can just drag and drop it in here, run the flow again, and look at the data more deeply. So we have it on the left-hand side. I will just go into pH level, for example, and we can see the distribution about of the values, some statistical measurements, and so on. So we can check our data in here, always connected to it, and have some more information, for example, also about the interpolation here that came up from the tool. In here, we could see what values are in there. So at the bottom, we have the top values. So almost all of the rows did not need to be interpolated, and one needed to, and it was the values of energy, pressure, and volume. So so this would be a use case that is often needed in pharmaceutical experiments. And but you could adjust it as you like, because there are different approaches to handle missing data, of course. But let's come to the next step. So what we would do with this data often is look at the data values, and if they are outside of control limits or outliers. So also there are different approaches. Sometimes the control limits are set by the development of the experiment, but there's also XMR chart approach. I will just take this picture, make it a little bit bigger for you to see. You don't need to see the details, but the XMR chart stands for X individual and MR moving range, and it will calculate the average of the values and the average of the moving range, or the change between the time points, how much the value changed, and will calculate on that base the control limits. So in this case, you see the control limits. I hope they're big enough. The red lines, and the points that are outside of the control limits are marked red. The other ones are inside of it. And yeah, this is how the XMR chart works as a description of that. Of course, there are different few approaches, but just to try to explain the use case. So what did we do here? We also built a macro, but didn't build it from scratch. And this is one example I wanted to show you, because there the Alteryx community comes in, because I just Googled XMR chart because my customer asked for it. And when you Google something with Alteryx in it, you almost come to the Alteryx community page. It looks something like that, and somebody asked something about XMR. So I scrolled through the comment, and there was one, Kelly Gilbert, who answered, so just a regular Alteryx user, and dropped in a Alteryx file, which I downloaded and adjusted to my needs. And this is a way to integrate new ways of calculating and to approach things on a different in a different way, to just Google it, find examples that are close enough to it, and adjust it to your needs. And this is one advice Alteryx would also always give, because the community is really active. So I downloaded this, and this looked like this workflow. So some data creation, some calculation, and some visualization that we will look into also. This was or is a container I was talking about earlier. So you put your tools in here, and you can just switch it on and switch it off, and the calculation just stops here and could carry on in another path, but this whole area won't be calculated. It might be useful, for example, machine learning algorithm that takes a long time, so you just put it into a container, disable it, and when you have time, you could run that part. But what I wanted to show you, I just downloaded this workflow and I made it into a macro. So just memorize this a little bit, and we will jump to my workspace, and it looks kind of similar. So this one is exactly the same. And also I took the visualization and tweaked it a little bit around, and I put in here this little input macro tool. All the macros are black and white, and then it will be made into a tool. And here's the output. So I just took somebody else's work and tweaked it a little bit around. And this is a good way to get started, to get examples and work from there around. But let's go back here. So this is the macro, and we want to look what comes out of it. So there are two anchors and no description, because I didn't make that effort to write it in there, but we can look at the data that comes out of here. So when I click on this anchor, I see there's some kind of report. I can put in a browse tool, and this is what the report looks like. So this would be some kind of visualization that can be done in Alteryx. It is sufficient for a lot of cases. I can go in here, I can see the values, I can even zoom in and see it on a deeper level. I can zoom back and so on. And I can create my own charts. This is a line chart, but I can create, of course, a bar chart and so on, all the typical chart types. And the other anchor just gives me the control limits, which I might use for later analysis, what points have a flag and what does lay in the control limits. But now we are almost at the end of the use cases. Now we look into how to export this. So there are different ways. Of course, we can do some calculations afterwards with it. But this is the end for this webinar with Alteryx. Almost there's one way to export it. We can export this this report we created in the macro, export it to a PDF. We can also add some text, some more information, and put it all in a PDF. It is pretty quick if we enable it and run it. And we see down here the PDF has been created. We can click on it and just open it. Of course, it's not interactive anymore because it's a PDF. What would also be important for reporting and analyzing experience is sending an email. So there's an option that we I just have to see the right there. It's the first one to send it via email. So we just put in our tool and connect it to, for example, our report. That would be more interesting, to our report, and could put in here our email address, where to send it, put in the report as a body. We could also use the information from some fields. So we could have a list of people we want to send our email to and put it in a table and connect it to our email tool. And when we send it, it takes a little time. We can also see in the tool configuration, we can enable and disable this tool because it takes always a little time, and we don't want to send infinite number of emails, of course. So we can enable and disable this in the configuration itself. In this instance, it would send an email every time we run the workflow, but we can put in some conditions. For example, when there are too many data points that are under or over the limits, control limits, and only then it will get sent off. But we will look at a dashboarding tool now. So we just want to export our data. So of course it is possible to write it just to an Excel. I just did here pivot and joined some data together. Nothing special. As you can see, I can just make the container small and big, and also connect the tools wireless, so does not get too confusing with all the lines in there. But let's jump into our dashboard. So I open up Spotfire, for instance, and we have our data here. But a dashboarding tool, of course, shows you a lot of more functionalities for drilling down in your data. I, for example, showed have the numbers that exceed the limits marked in red. I can filter when I click on this batches. I only see batch 4 in the table here. I can mark in here, and all the data gets reduced to the marked ones. I can go in and look at the data and create charts depending on what I marked in other visualizations and so on. This would be one approach to show it. Another example would be some kind of control board or some kind of report, what data points are marked and which are okay regarding the control lines. We could click on here and see that they are marked in the other visualizations and how the other data points at the same date time look like, and also do some stuff with the hierarchy. So in here we have year, month, day, hour, and minute. Don't see the minutes clearly because there are too many, but I can also aggregate the data and only look at the hours, so it will calculate the mean of that, and I can switch it around for all the visualizations. But that's just a brief how to use it in a dashboarding tool and what advantages we get when we use it here. I wanted to show you that because we can connect Alteryx to a dashboarding tool and vice versa. So I just go back to my presentation and the right slide. So I called this big picture. We started today with Alteryx Designer and a few use cases. And we had some local files, and we can read and write from Alteryx, from the local files to Alteryx and vice versa. We can send our reporting and warning to our colleagues, boss, or whatever. And we, of course, have our dashboarding tool, for example, Spotfire, Tableau, Power BI, and so on. We can connect the dashboard to our local files, so read them most of the time. We can write with a lot of dashboards, but with a little bit of work. And most important, we can trigger from Spotfire and Alteryx workspace, but we can also trigger from Alteryx Spotfire. So we can make it all in one circle and just trigger one specific workspace from our dashboard just with a click, and everything gets renewed and our dashboard looks fresh and gets the new data in. But when we scale it up and want to connect to colleagues better, we would use, for example, an Alteryx server. So we scale it up, we can share, we can schedule it, we can governing it, and it all gets a little bit more dynamic and more easy to use. We can, for example, share our macros, as I showed beforehand. Our macros we can share via the server, and everybody can use my aggregation tool in there, which really helps to work agile. But let's make the big picture bigger. So we had the local data files. We put it in databases. So I used the word bases, so plural, because Alteryx can connect to a lot of databases at the same time and grab the data from it. So you can switch it up as you like. We could put in an Alteryx server so we can schedule our workflows, we can share them, governing, we can load balance our workspaces, which is more important when we have more difficult workspaces, for example, in machine learning, optimization, and so on, or we have a lot of simple workspaces. Also, we can have, if we use Spotfire, we can have a Spotfire server We can access our dashboard via web player. We can share, automate, govern, of course. So everything gets a little bit more round and adjustable and scalable. And of course, we still can trigger from our dashboard Alteryx Designer. So everything works together and gets updated and run at the right time. But this is all I wanted to show you. So 2 examples in pharmaceutical sector. So with the aggregation, so the daytime problem that they are not syncing up, and the XMR chart. And of course, with all that, that it's easy to create macros that can be used in many use cases and don't require any coding. So this is all done by dragging and just adjusting some settings, and it's quite easy to learn, I say, and the community is there to investigate and to have questions and get them answered there. So a little bit of outlook there. In May, we have a webinar on how to successfully use Gen AI in Alteryx Cloud solution. Alteryx Cloud, I didn't even mention once. There are a few interesting solutions in there. So yeah, I'm interested to see that, what my colleagues will prepare for that. And the other one is a little bit closer to today's session. It's about stability analysis in Alteryx as a pharmaceutical use case. So stay tuned for that. It will be very interesting. And to finish this up and come to the questions, we have like 10 minutes left. These are the people you can contact. So me first, Lynn Petzold, I'm just a data scientist. And then if you have questions about licensing and other stuff, please write my colleague Sasha. And for Stats of Polska, I wrote down Rafa Weider. So you can contact all of us, and we will be all happy to help you. But yeah, this is it for me now. And I think my colleagues will jump in and have some questions for me.
Yes. Hello, Lynn. First of all, thanks a lot for the insightful talk, which I hope was really interesting for everyone. And I can see that we have some questions in the chat. So I will go through them one by one. The first one is, we do have custom analysis in R? Can they be integrated in the Alteryx flowchart as well?
Yes. Very simple answer, yes. So in Alteryx, R and Python are integrated. So you could copy and paste your code in there or adjust it. And we had some approaches with customers and they had Python code. So the plan was to put in a lot of Python code in there and just look at what they could transfer to Alteryx tools, because it's much better documented in there. But I think for pharmaceutical sector, it's often that they have very specific calculations and they integrated it already in R, and it can be just copied in there and just adjusted. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. I did not mention that Matthias is here. You mentioned him when we started the meeting, but I just wanted to introduce him to the people here. Matthias is a senior data scientist, and he's very proficient in pharma. So if you have any specific questions related to pharmaceutical use cases, don't hesitate to put them in the chat. But I do have a second question here. It's not really it's not focusing on pharma, but anyway, can you execute analysis on a regular basis without any user interaction in Alteryx?
In Alteryx, yeah, as I shown a few slides before with the Alteryx server, you can schedule and automate your jobs. So, for example, a data scientist will configure a workspace and will load it up to the server, and then somebody who does not know how Alteryx works can execute this workflow from the server without having Alteryx Designer or having any idea how it works, but can just run it and adjust it in the web player of server. We see here a short glimpse of it, and can download the results from the web player. I guess that's what was asked by that question, as I understood it correctly.
I think so, yes. Thanks a lot. And there's one more question. Can a Spotfire dashboard be made available through a web interface?
Yes, we just saw it for Alteryx server in this slide. You can exit it via web player, but also it's for the Spotfire server. I just wrote it down here. It's also available to exit it via web player and just be a consumer of it and don't change the analysis. Or if you have the rights and the license, you can, of course, change and create your dashboards in the web player without Spotfire installed.
Okay, thank you. So there are no more questions in the chat. Your talk was probably so insightful that everything's clear to everybody right now.
And if you have any questions or are interested in something I only touched on, feel free to write any of us three that are on the slide, and we will try to answer. And if we are not able to, we will give it to a colleague. So don't hesitate and write one of us, and we will get in touch. Yeah, I hope that was insightful and interesting in some parts or in all parts. And I was happy to see a lot of people here. And yeah, just a reminder, we have other webinars soon. And we will be happy to see you there.
Thank you very much for joining, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.